Hey everyone, I wanted to create a video explaining why when you're using Dirac, you need to lower your curtains for your um, for all the speakers. And I'm going to explain it through using REW graphs that demonstrate what's going on when you do a full curtain with your Dirac settings. So when you are applying those filters, if you do full curtain, and by what I mean by that is that Dirac is EQing the entire frequency range, everything from, let's say, 10 or 15 hertz all the way up to 20, 30 plus kilohertz. And so I'm going to do that through this REW graph. So what you're seeing here is this is the SPL response for my center channel with no Dirac applied. And you can see that there's some major issues here in terms of the bass. Lots of variation here. And even in, your mid-range areas, there's just a lot, right? Like even, this 159 hertz region, you just get this massive increase. So Dirac is able to do that very effectively. And so what I'll show you next is this is full curtain. So this is a full curtain change in Dirac. And so you can see that I'm able to apply a house curve. I meaningfully boost the bass response. I tackle this, kind of lower to, I'd say, lower mid-range area here from about 142 hertz to 300 hertz. This is tamed so that it's flatter. I get a slight improvement in terms of the response for about 1.6 kilohertz. And then I'm able to, with the house curve I have applied, where it just gradually kind of tapers off in the higher frequencies. Now, here's the problem, though, and I'll explain this in a little bit, is that when you do this, you significantly increase the distortion. And so I'll show you real quick just the SPL for two other curtain settings, and then I'm going to go into the distortion. So stay with me on this just a little bit. So if you apply, most people recommend, at least from what I've heard from audio experts like Matthew Pose, recommend, I think, around 1,000 hertz or 1 kilohertz is where, you pull down that curtain in your Dirac settings. You pull it down until you get to 1,000 hertz. So this is the 1,000 hertz response. So you can see that it's overlapping significantly with the purple. So that's the Dirac with full curtain. So I'm getting all the same benefits in the bass to mid-range frequencies, but things start to kind of change once we pass the 1 kilohertz mark, which is what we would expect, right? Because we've pulled the curtain down, and so we're allowing the natural response of the speaker. And so it's now following the green line instead of the purplish blue line. Now it's following the green line and, perfectly matches, right? So that all makes sense. And then finally, I tested just doing a 4 kilohertz or 4,000 hertz one as well. It not much change here, right? It pretty much perfectly overlaps the 1,000 hertz window as well, right? So from an SPL standpoint, doing 4 kilohertz or 1 kilohertz did not matter. But where things really do matter is in distortion. So let me switch over here to distortion. So I have it set here where my y-axis is percentages. So if you're doing this in REW, if you go to the distortion tab, I think the default is SPL. I recommend switching it to the percentage. for me, it makes a lot more sense. And, maybe for simplicity, you can just turn off some of these here. Um, what I'm really interested in understanding is just the THD. And that's total harmonic distortion. So this is just telling me overall, like how much distortion across the frequency spectrum is my speaker is experiencing. So a few things to note. This is for no Dirac applied, just natural response with integration with my subwoofer and my center channel. First, higher distortion in the lower frequencies, right? So ideally you are, I guess the rule of thumb is you want to be below 1%, which is this line here. But you can see that in the lower frequencies, we have some that are, climbing up to like 4 and, maybe 4 or 5, getting closer to 5%. And then, overall the speaker does pretty good, right? Like, somewhere between 0.5 and 1 is kind of hovering. And then around 1.5 kilohertz, it gets, a little bit spiky, potentially up to 2% distortion. So overall, for a budget home theater speaker, and this is, by the way, a Polk 265 RT, it's not bad, right? Could it be better? Yes. But overall, not a huge amount of distortion. Now watch what happens, though, when I do a full curtain Dirac calibration here, or EQ, I should say. So if I do, sorry, it's going to be this one. Boom. So here's where positive things are, right? See a drop in the distortion, right, for lower frequencies. Overall, much better than it was before. And I'll switch back here just so you can see before and after. So improvement in the bass response. And that's where Dirac is known for doing a good job, is in its ability to phase align, to tame the bass response, and just overall is just a more seamless integration with your subwoofer and your speakers. And so that's all what's going on here, is we see an improvement there. However, we see significant increases in distortion going up into the frequency range, and so this is going up to 10 kilohertz. But you can see that the distortion now is hovering around 2%, climbs up as high as 5%. And so this is starting to get in the spot where that level of distortion is going to be audible. And that's where applying a curtain. So if I apply a 1 kilohertz curtain, you see that I still am able to tame the distortion in the bass range, right? All that goodness is still there. But now look at the higher frequencies here. The distortion that was there is no longer there. And so if I compare with the with no Dirac at all, you can see that the overall distortion in the upper frequencies remains unchanged. And that's kind of what we would expect, right? And the way to interpret this is that when we lower the curtain to 1 kilohertz, we are not trying to force fit the speaker into a specific house curve. Instead, we're allowing the speaker, in this case, these upper frequencies, the tweeter, to perform the way that they were engineered and designed. And as a result, you don't have the same levels of distortion you would get if you were to have a full curtain with your Dirac settings. And so I'll show real quick the 4 kilohertz. So right now this is 1 kilohertz and 4 kilohertz. So overall, not a huge difference at all in the response. Maybe a little bit more distortion for some reason in around 80 hertz, 80, 90 hertz. I'm not quite sure why that'd be. But whenever you change anything within Dirac in terms of the curve or the curtains, Dirac, it's a very complex mathematical model. And so it's trying to adjust everywhere across any frequencies it can adjust. Um, and so even changing the curtain is going to change the math, which may change the way that Dirac handles lower frequencies, even though it's like, hey, like I have this, the curtain applied for 80 hertz before, with any of the settings, like why is it changing? Well, there's just more minute changes that are going on in the background with what Dirac is doing, is my understanding. So all that said, I tested these different settings, listening to music and watching a show, and I could tell a difference when I switched from full curtain down to a 1 kilohertz curtain. It was harder to detect the difference between 1 and 4 kilohertz curtains with the Dirac settings, I'll admit, but I ended up landing on the 1 kilohertz curtain. The dialogue, uh, for whatever reason, it just seemed crisper and cleaner to me. Uh, just different instruments, the surround effects that were going on in the show, everything seemed to just be a little clearer to me. And that makes sense, right? Because when we're switching from a full curtain to a 1 kilohertz curtain, we've meaningfully dropped the distortion in frequencies, starting around 1 kilohertz and above. We've reduced that amount of distortion and allowing the speaker to behave naturally. I will say, I wish there was a way that I could have the speakers do a more natural roll off in the higher frequencies. So like when you're getting into the 6 to 10 kilohertz region, that's where I wish it was just a little bit softer. And I'm glad that I have the Silk Dome tweeters with the Polk 265 RTs. I think my understanding is that Silk Dome tweeters are just a little bit softer relative to other types of tweeters that may be a little bit more harsh. That being said, more expensive speakers do have, I believe, more natural roll off in the higher frequencies, so you can get the benefits of that without having to use Dirac and having a wide curtain for it. But suffice it to say, the sound sounded better with the 1 kilohertz curtain than it did with the full. The full sounded muddy, and it was the dialogue wasn't as crisp. It was a little harder to pick up, and so I'm really glad that I tested this and then was able to measure through RAW to understand what exactly is going on. Why is that the case? What's going on in the background? And also just to understand how Dirac really is a great tool for the lower frequencies, where it's able to help align with the subs and the phase alignments, with the crossovers, and you're able to just get lower distortion in those lower frequency areas. So I hope that this video was helpful. I don't know if there's any other video on YouTube, on the internet, that talks about this kind of level of detail around why setting a 1 kilohertz curtain is advisable for Dirac, and why that's the case, how to measure it, how to interpret something within RAW to make sense in your own space, right? So that you could do this in your own home theater, measure it, and see what you get from it. So I hope this was helpful. If it was, please like and subscribe. It just helps to grow the channel and grow exposure. I'm not in this for any kind of money. I don't get sponsored. This is just me trying to help out fellow enthusiasts in the home theater community. So thanks for watching.